It's hard to believe, but we're rushing now toward Advent. And so we're coming to the end of the church year. And as we come to the end of the church year, the church always have these readings which talk about end times and judgment and time to kind of reassess ourselves, if you will. And St. Paul starts it out very well in Thessalonians. And he tells us, it says common sense, we as human beings know this. He says, concerning the times and seasons, I don't have to write anything down for you. Because he says, you know very well that the day of the Lord is going to come like a thief. And when people are saying peace and security, destruction and disaster will come upon them. We know that. As human beings, we watch the news and we know that as human beings, at any moment, our life could be ended. So we're aware of that. And St. Paul is correct. If we want to be more dramatic about it, if your imagination takes you into bigger and worse places, this could also be apocalyptical. So that not only my life, but just the life of the planet, universe, etc. Just make it grander, if you will, the type of disaster, but nonetheless, in the back of our minds, we know it is there. But St. Paul says at the same time that, well, wait a minute now. You're not in the darkness. You know this. So act accordingly. Live your life right. And if it comes, it comes. And what are we going to do about it? But you will be ready, and you'll be living in the light, and not in the darkness. So, my point here is that we can look upon these church readings, and we're about to look at all of them, in a kind of big apocalyptical way, or our own demise. Okay, but I'd like to expand that out a little bit and say, let's don't put these readings in that box. These readings can talk to us about our everyday life, if you will. How can we get through our life, and how can we get through the day being a good Christian? So let's kind of expand these out a little bit. And let's take an account of ourselves. Because this is the end of the year, you kind of make an account at the end of the year to prepare for the next year. So let's do that. All right. A master was going away. Now, he gave 5, and we know the story, we've heard it. 5 goes to this person, 2 goes to this person, 1 goes to this person. However, already we know something about the master that is a little peculiar. He gave talents to each according to their ability. So this was not a master who was aloof, who didn't care, who kind of set out, I guess, in the big house and let managers do the work. This was a master who knew his servants. Says, well, this person can handle 5, this 2, this 1. He knew each of his servants and what they were capable of. So he gave them these talents, he gave them this money, and he says, I got to go. And off he goes, and we don't know where he went. He just went somewhere to do master things. So then he came back after a long time and says, okay, it's time to settle up. The settling time. Now, we don't hear too much from the 5 guy and the 2 guy. All we hear is that, hey, you gave me this, I doubled it. And that's what they said. And here's what the master said. Well done, my good and faithful servant. And then I'm going to go to the end. Come share your master's joy. This is not a normal employee-employer kind of relationship, it sounds like. Not a bit. Because that's not really how it happens. The master is talking in relationship. To share joy means that you know who I am and you share in what I have. And so the master says to these servants, you now will share in my joy. That's really different. And now we learn a little bit more about the master. However, now we're going to learn a lot. And it comes from the servant with 1. because we hear from that servant the most. Here we go. Master, I knew you were a demanding person. Now this is different. Suddenly we're getting a different take on the master. I know that you are a demanding person. Now it doesn't say he's mean or anything like that, but he's demanding. In other words, you got to do your job. I expect something from you. I know that you harvest where you did not plant, and you gather where you did not scatter. Now, it seems like this guy knows a little bit about the master, which is kind of spooky now. We got a different side. Because he implies here that he takes. And maybe he does. He's that powerful. And sure enough, he's going to take where he did not plant, and he's going to gather where he did not scatter. This is a man of power. All right, and this servant calls him out. And the master admits to it, because after the servant says, well, here, I buried it, and here it is back. The master gets mad, and he says exactly what the servant says. So you know that I harvest where I did not plant and gather where I did not scatter. You know that. And so even the master is speaking to him kind of on a kind of a serious level here. The servant calls him out, but the master admits it. But he says, what did you do? You did nothing. You did absolutely nothing. The servant says, I was scared. The master says, you're a wicked, lazy servant. The master obviously is expecting some type of industry. He wants to see something. There is something that has to be done. And this is crucial, that this servant did not see or even do. Maybe could not even comprehend. So let's go to the book of Proverbs. What is that work? There is a woman in the book of Proverbs who is an unfailing prize. She is an unfailing prize. She brings good. She cares about her family. She's married. She's making sure that her family is well clothed and no doubt well fed. She works for her family because she loves her family. And not only that, in this one beautiful little sentence, she reaches out her hands to the poor and extends her arms to the needy. And this is what makes her beautiful. Charming and beauty is fleeting, but the woman who serves the Lord, great rewards are reaped upon her for her labors, and let her works praise her at the city gates. This woman cared for her family. She cared for her community. She served her family. She served her community out of love. She was a woman of great labor of love. As opposed to our servant, our one servant. Now, our servant has an excuse. I was afraid because I know what kind of guy you are. That's what the servant says, and that's his excuse. And it sort of a good excuse. If we want to be nice about it, we say, oh, well, okay. But the master is certainly having none of it. Because here's why. Fear is an awful thing. If there's one thing that can destroy us and stop us dead in our tracks, it is fear. Fear of doing the right thing, fear of speaking up, fear of being in love. It is an awful thing. As a matter of fact, some spiritual authors I've read and all that, we can look at love and hate. I would put fear as opposed to love. Fear can mess up love in a second. And it paralyzes us, and it means that we don't do anything. You ever been scared where you kind of get that clenched up feeling when you get scared? Well, that's what fear does. Clenches us up, and we don't move. And this is exactly what this servant did. He clenched up. He saw the master as somebody to fear, and because of that, he says, I ain't doing nothing. And he's going to use fear as an excuse. It's an interesting excuse, but you can only go so far with it. The master, in his anger, does something pretty rough. And this gospel reading has a rough ending. So, first of all, he takes the guy's money, that 1 talent, throws it to the guy who's got 10. Now he's got 11 and says, hey, whoever, the more you have and the more you give, the more you're going to have. And okay, we know that story. Okay. But at the end, he says, throw this useless servant into the darkness outside where there'll be wailing and grinding of teeth. Throw him out. Out he goes. Where there's wailing and grinding of teeth. And that's an awful image. But I maintain that the woman in Proverbs and this servant who was thrown out are really in the same place. For a person who is fearful, when the servant was thrown out, and if that servant is so full of fear, all he's going to see is fear. Doesn't matter where he's at. Doesn't matter where he goes. So he gets thrown outside the castle. It's a fearful place. If you're fearful, and if that's all you think about, that's all you're going to see. So for him, when he got thrown out, there's nothing but wailing and grinding of teeth. Now, if you speak to the woman in Proverbs, what loving woman, what loving mother, what loving wife is not concerned with her family? There's always fear there. Always fearful that her children and her husband are okay. Always. That fear is there always. But she chooses to keep loving. She makes a choice. I can give in to the fear, or I can keep loving. She reaches out her hands to the poor and extends her arms to the needy. We know this. As Christians, we want to embrace everybody, and whenever I want to do something for the needy, I kind of want the needy to come back and give me a hug. I kind of expect it, I kind of want it. As if, yes, look at me, I am giving you something wonderful, now hug me back, and everything will be okay. But that's not how it works, because sometimes needy people and sometimes homeless people, just the need of people, sometimes do not make them nice people. And therefore, my open hug is not going to come back to me. So when we go out into the world and reach out our hands to the poor and extend our arms to the needy like this woman did, we cannot expect anything but sometimes maybe rejection. And maybe this woman was, and I bet you she was. But it did not stop her. That is important. You cannot let fear guide your life. Fear makes us bring everything in, and we cease to extend. So I think the woman and the one servant, the servant with the 1 talent, were really in the same place, but they saw 2 different things. So, here we are at the end of the year. Now, there's an accounting to give. Now we have to stand before the Master, all of us. Now, we have 2 tales. One, a cautionary tale. The servant with the one talent is telling us, watch out for fear, and watch out for the wailing and grinding of teeth. But now we have this woman who comes to us and says, you know what? It is far better to love your family, to love your friends. It is far better to reach out and love your community. Now for us, now we have the accounting. Where do we stand on that? Where are we fearful? And where can we be more like this woman and reflect God's love?